Before the season, the Houston Rockets lost their steady, veteran point guard Fred VanVleet to an ACL tear, leaving them without a single proven, real point guard on their roster. And yet, they are 10-3 right now with the #1 offense in the NBA. Just 4 games into the year, the Atlanta Hawks lost their star point guard Trae Young for an extended stretch with an MCL sprain, forcing them into a starting lineup without a point guard. And yet, they are 8-3 in his absence with the #4 defense in the NBA in that time. Tyler Herro, an all-star for the first time last year, and the offensive standout de facto point guard for the Miami Heat, has yet to suit up this season due to injury. Yet his team, which was predicted to finish several games below 500, has been above average on both sides of the ball with a 9-6 record. It would have seemed that all these teams would be doomed by the injuries to their established point guards, but instead, they've all been better without them. What is going on here? How are they doing this? And what does it say about the state of the point guard in today's NBA? Have we reached a place where NBA teams just don't need point guards anymore? As we strive to answer this question by looking at the teams who are succeeding without one this year, I want to first dive in to how the point guard position has already rapidly evolved in recent history. The pure point guard, in other words, a pass-first point guard who is incapable of threatening the defense as a scorer, which was the standard at the position for many years, think about a Mark Jackson back in the day or a Tyus Jones today, has been obsolete in the NBA, at least in terms of having a significant role for at least a decade. The skill boom that occurred with the simultaneous three-point and pick-and-roll revolutions made guards more potent offensively than ever before, which changed expectations league-wide. Now, a lead guard was expected to be a true offensive engine for his team, to be a high-level scorer who could also leverage that scoring threat to create plays for his teammates. Of course, the best guards throughout NBA history could always score and play make, but by the mid to late 2010s, there were simply way more of those guys than ever before, making the pass-first or pass-only archetype largely irrelevant and unnecessary. So in this video, we're not talking about the death of the pure point guard. That's old news. We are now talking about further questions being raised as to where point guards fit in this more evolved game, where new solutions are being found and new challenges are being posed. The story of Trae Young and the Hawks is the perfect place to start here. For years, Trae has been one of the league's most controversial stars. He's put up massive box score numbers, taking on a huge scoring and playmaking load, but has also embodied a rigid, ball-dominant style with certain shot-making, finishing, and overall efficiency limitations. All the while, and far more damningly, being known as one of the league's most catastrophic defenders at just 6'1" and 165 pounds. This mixture of good and bad makes him kind of the perfect test case for the viability in today's NBA of the offensively gifted but imperfect and defensively damaging small point guard. Trae has a proven track record of elevating team offenses, but is nevertheless flawed on that side of the ball, and he is going to make your defense worse, which starts the conversation about whether he is ultimately a worthy building block and a clear net positive for his team. Because bad defensive guards are more costly to their team's defense in today's NBA than ever before. Why? Because they're harder to hide. Offenses are more deliberate than ever about exploiting weak defenders by putting them into action over and over, and they are more capable of doing so because there are more skilled offensive players on the floor who can attack them, and because ball screens are so prevalent today with switching at an all-time high. In the simplest terms, this means you can repeatedly bring that small, poor defensive guard up to defend a ball screen and force them into a problematic matchup more easily off a switch, or force the defense in some way to try to compensate for their weakness to keep them out of that matchup, likely by putting 2 on the ball for a second, which now forces the rest of the team to defend at a numbers disadvantage. And no matter what, you can at least simply make a bad, physically limited defender guard the action in any way. This means a bad defender, regardless of position, can compromise their defense on a possession-to-possession basis more notably than ever before. This dilemma is not at all unique to Trae. Other star small guards like Darius Garland and Jalen Brunson have had huge problems of the same vein, and gifted offensive guards like Tyler Herro and Austin Reeves, who are bigger but lack strength and foot speed, were also successfully and repeatedly attacked on defense in last year's playoffs. But Trae is one of the clearest examples of a star offensive guard who is a big-time negative defender. So how have things changed for Atlanta in his absence? Well, they've gone all in on a starting lineup that features elite defensive personnel and no point guards. They have top-notch point of attack defenders in Dyson Daniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, both of whom bring elite size in the backcourt, 2 rangy athletic forwards in Zachary Risachet and Jalen Johnson, and 2 quality options at center, an elite rim protector in Kristaps Porzingis, or when he's not available, the quicker, more switchable Onyeka Okongwu. Not only have they assembled a defensive group with no weak points, they have strong, versatile, long, competitive, athletic defenders everywhere, and it's made them a top 5 defense without Trae. They rank top 5 in blocks and are generating the second most steals per game, only to the Thunder, whose recipe they have followed when it comes to turning defense into offense, as the Hawks average the second most points off turnovers. That's been a huge part of their offensive success in Trae's absence. Steals lead to more transition scoring opportunities, and with a bunch of athletes who thrive in the open floor, especially a downhill weapon like Johnson, who ranks 6th in the league in transition points per game, and other strong transition scorers like Risachet and Alexander Walker, the Hawks have averaged 32.4 transition points per game since Trae got hurt, which would rank 3rd in the NBA. This formula of defense and transition offense, predicated upon the superior size and athleticism in their new look lineup, has been the backbone of Atlanta's recent winning formula, but they've also dramatically shifted their offensive approach in the half court without Trae. In the absence of their ball-dominant creator, Atlanta has instead relied on multiple solid ball handlers with more balanced responsibilities. Alexander Walker has emerged as their most proficient pick-and-roll creator, generating relatively efficient offense as the ball handler with a crafty driving style and solid passing feel. Johnson has done a little bit of everything and is playing at an all-star level given his all-around impact, and Daniels has excelled as a passer spotting cutters, ranking towards the top of the league in rim assists. So instead of everything running through Trae, they now profile as an overall high-feel offense with several capable ball handlers, passers, and athletic finishers, and multiple players who check all of those boxes. They rank 7th in points per game off of cuts, and all of this has been enough to make them the NBA's 12th ranked offense since Trae's injury. Coming into the year, I was high on Atlanta because of how I thought all these aspects would help complement Trae. They'd assembled the best defensive personnel he'd ever had around him to cover up for his deficiencies there and finally figure out the challenge of building a good team defense with Trae on the floor, which they had really never been able to do before. And they'd put more ball handling around him so his on-ball load would be less overwhelming. But instead, it's been the totality of their defense, collective ball handling, feel, passing, athleticism, and transition play that has made them a whole lot better without him entirely than they were when Trae was on the floor to start the year, when he was struggling and they went 1-3. Does this actually mean that Atlanta is better long-term without Trae Young? I'll come back to that later, but it's certainly working for now. But within the same division, the Heat have concocted an even more unique winning formula without their lead guard, Tyler Herro. Miami has adopted the most fascinating offense in the NBA. They don't run pick and rolls, like, at all. Memphis became famous for doing this last year before they abandoned it down the stretch, but Miami has pushed things way farther. The team running the next fewest pick and rolls, Houston, runs almost 27 per game. Miami runs just over 10. For more perspective on just how radical a change this is, Herro alone ran several more pick and rolls per game last year than Miami is as a team this year. Yet without their lead guard, Miami's offense has improved, going from 21st in offensive rating last year to 15th this year. A major part of their improvement is actually not related to their half-court system at all. The Heat have undergone as dramatic a change in pace as you'll ever see, skyrocketing from 27th last year to 1st by far this season, and ranking 2nd in transition points per game. Not only is transition offense just generally easier and more efficient than half-court offense, this specifically suits their personnel, as they have a number of good driving wings who thrive with a big runway and lots of space to attack, especially Jaime Jaquez, who has been an absolute weapon downhill. The Heat have become one of the most alert hit-ahead passing teams in the NBA, which creates more favorable transition scoring opportunities, but also creates more potential cross matches, as defenses have to scramble to get matched up with whoever can find a body. And that's advantageous to their system because it is entirely predicated upon drivers creating penetration without a ball screen. And obviously, drawing a more favorable matchup makes that easier. The Heat rank 2nd in the NBA in drives and 1st in assists off of drives. They have empowered everybody in their roster to attack off the dribble, be that as a true initiator where a guy like Jaquez excels and a player like Davion Mitchell has consistently been able to get into the paint to then create for others, or attacking off the catch where pretty much everybody on their roster is capable. This system does require that certain players win one-on-one as a driver to set things into motion, which is why Jaquez's ability to do so, along with his excellent finishing and strong passing, has made him the MVP of this offense so far. Miami does deliberately create clean paints for drivers to attack, spreading out and emphasizing 5-out spacing, and at times overloading one side of the floor to create swaths of space for a driver on the other side. But players are not ever stagnant in this offense. Attacks happen quickly and decisively, and there's lots of cutting, which creates more passing opportunities for drivers and at times shifts the defense to create better driving lanes too. This offense is also essentially positionless. Again, everybody is expected to be able to drive and make reads, and Bam Adebayo, for example, has become primarily a spot-up player, launching 6 threes a game this year, compared to 2.8 last season, which was already by far a career high for him. And as pretty much a full-time floor spacer, he's also now frequently attacking closeouts, and this stands totally in opposition to his previous role as more of a self-creator out of the high post, where he's struggled to be efficient at volume in years past. Yet this system has fit Bam well. It fits Jaquez, who's taken a major leap. It fits an elite off-ball scorer like Norman Powell, who blends slashing and elite three-point shooting beautifully and is having a career season in this offense. It pretty much fits everyone who's currently healthy on the team. And again, this selfless, up-tempo, drive and kick and drive and cut offense where anybody can cook doesn't require a point guard. So although they start a nominal point guard in Mitchell, he hardly operates as one, and they don't even have a backup at the position. So for 18 minutes a game, they are truly completely without a point guard. This hasn't just been a short-term solution to compensate for their lack of an upper echelon pick and roll ball handler right now. It's led to legitimate offensive improvement. Also, with a weak defender like Herro out of the lineup, Miami has even improved upon their identity as a great defensive team, ranking as a top 3 defense in the games that Adebayo, far and away their best defender and one of the best on the planet, has played. That defensive improvement is to be expected, but considering how they've gotten better on offense by adopting a system that it's difficult to see Herro as one of the most screen-dependent creators in basketball fitting into, we have to ask the question, is his return just gonna make them worse? We'll address that later too. I'm not trying to edge you guys, I promise, but before we get into all that, we have to talk about another one of the most unique offenses in basketball that is working remarkably well, the Rockets. Houston effectively doesn't have a guard, period, in their starting lineup. Their standard starting five this year has featured a 6'4" defensive-minded wing with a 7-foot wingspan, a 6'7" wing with a 7-foot wingspan, and 3 players who are 6'11". Although when they've been feeling really froggy, they've gone with a lineup featuring 4 6'11" players, 2 of whom are straight up centers, with 6'7" super athlete Amen Thompson as their smallest starter. Given their personnel, Houston didn't attempt to force a guard into their starting lineup following VanVleet's injury. Instead, they leaned further into their superpowers, crazy size, athleticism, and utterly dominant offensive rebounding. The Rockets are perhaps the best offensive rebounding team ever. Their offensive rebound rate of 40.8% is the highest in at least the last 30 years. Thompson is probably the best offensive rebounding wing in the sport. Alperen Sengun is an elite offensive rebounder. Steven Adams leads the NBA in offensive rebounds per game with 5.1 in just 22 minutes and is the best offensive rebounder of this century. Tari Eason excels on the offensive glass for his position, and just for the hell of it, they have Clint Capella for 10 minutes a game, who grabs 2.5 offensive boards in those minutes. The value of this dominance on the offensive glass is pretty simple. It means they just get more chances to score than anybody else. But it's not just that. Second chances are also more efficient because they often either result in a putback opportunity near the basket or leave the defense scrambled and create great opportunities to kick it back out to an open three-point shooter. This allows Houston to excel with what looks like horrific spacing in the modern NBA. Nobody takes fewer threes than the Rockets, yet they lead the league in offensive rating. And specifically, some of their worst shooting lineups have been their best on offense. In the regular season minutes they've played Sengun, Adams, and Thompson together, effectively 3 non-shooters, although Sengun has become more of a shooter this year. Dating back to last year, they have posted a ludicrous 127 offensive rating, 12 points better than league average, while posting a slightly below league average true shooting percentage, which is only possible because they grab 46% of their own misses in those lineups. No matter what, if the defense can never end the possession, you're gonna score eventually. So they have aggressively embraced pure size, athleticism, and rebounding at the expense of the perimeter guard skill that today's NBA feels like it's built off of, and it has worked incredibly well. But along with their completely unique rebounding dominance, the Rockets have a completely unique point center in Sengun, who has been able to take on a huge ball handling and playmaking load for this team, averaging 23 points and 7.5 assists per game, as he is primarily responsible for initiating and creating advantages for their offense. Thompson has also been entrusted with some more on-ball responsibility, and as a freak athlete who handles quite well for his size, he's also able to consistently penetrate the paint as a gifted passer in those spots who also finishes quite well at the basket. So both create a fair bit of offense for the team, but neither is anything like a conventional point guard. Their only listed point guard of any note is Reed Sheppard, who has stepped up off the bench for this team to provide quality minutes, but he hardly fits the bill of a typical point guard, as almost half of his total scoring comes off of catch and shoot threes, and he's a limited on-ball player. Given their lack of a conventional lead ball handling guard, Houston runs the second fewest pick and rolls in the NBA. Although they aren't a high volume transition team, the Rockets do produce with elite efficiency there, where their best athletes like Amen shine, and of course, the final component of their offensive success, and it is a big one, is having a Kevin Durant, one god-tier shot maker who can score with elite efficiency at high volume, even with suboptimal spacing around him. Although it is worth noting, he has pretty much purely been a scorer for Houston, not a primary ball handler and not much of a playmaker. But he's still fantastic and essential for this team to have that one genuine elite perimeter shot maker who can get his shot off consistently. So, while running very little pick and roll and taking the fewest threes in the league with no point guard, eschewing many central tenets of modern NBA offense, Houston has engineered a #1 offense so far with a one-of-a-kind formula. Also, their defense should be just as strong, as they're able to prioritize elite positional size and athleticism across the board with very similar personnel to that which fueled last year's 4th-ranked defense. So these three squads represent totally distinct, fascinating examples of how teams have found success without a point guard this year, but they are not the only ones. The 9-6 Suns have been one of the biggest overachievers in the early season, and ironically, many highlighted them as the team most in need of a true point guard before last season, which they pursued in Tyus Jones, who didn't actually solve any of their problems. This season, Devin Booker has acted as the team's point guard just by being an elite primary creator, because it turns out it doesn't make sense to take the ball out of the star's hands to give it to a Tyus Jones type, and they have done their best to maximize shooting, size, and athleticism around Book to put together what is currently a top 10 offense and a top 12 defense. The Timberwolves finally made the wise decision to start Dante DiVincenzo over the very deteriorated 38-year-old Mike Conley this season, and they've gotten off to a strong 10-5 start while ranking as a top 5 offense without a starting point guard, blending elite paint pressure with elite three-point shooting. They've realized they don't need to force Conley, who has the point guard skill set but is simply an inferior player to DiVincenzo, onto the floor, and they're succeeding by simply playing their best guys and trusting their aggregate offensive size, athleticism, and skill to come through. You can even look at a team like the Trailblazers. They don't have an available backup point guard after Drew Holiday, so they play 15 minutes per game without one on the floor at all. But what they do have is a lot of athletic wings who excel in the open floor, especially an elite power driver and blossoming star like Deni Avdija, so they lean into that, ranking top 3 in transition points per game, and they use their elite collective size with one dominant offensive rebounding big in Donovan Clingan to rank 2nd in offensive rebound percentage, making up for their lack of a lead guard and half-court limitations by excelling in these other areas. So clearly, more teams are finding a way to win without point guards than we've ever seen. And broadly, I believe there's a few reasons this is happening. The NBA is constantly and rapidly changing, perhaps more so this decade than ever. Like, we think of the NBA as a pick and roll league, and it is, but 4 of the point guardless teams we discussed today rank among the 8 teams running the fewest pick and roll in the NBA, including 2 top 4 offenses in Houston and Minnesota. Pick and roll is still an essential part of the game, a bedrock of the vast majority of NBA offenses. But as much as offenses have innovated there, defenses have formulated better solutions, assembling more mature coverages, prioritizing better equipped defensive personnel, especially for switching. So pick and roll volume is actually down about 10% league-wide compared to its peak back in 2020. Pick and roll is still great, but teams have been forced to adopt a bit more offensive variety, which can slightly diminish the value or necessity of a very pick and roll heavy guard compared to 5 or 6 years ago. Transition has also become even more of a priority for offenses. Pace league-wide is the fastest it's been since 1987, and specifically, transition frequency is up almost 25% from where it was at just in 2020, when the game was already being played very fast. Transition offense is the most efficient in basketball, and teams are leaning into it more than they have in ages. And a great point guard is typically not as important in the full court. If you have big, fast wing athletes who handle reasonably well, those guys can excel in transition offense where they have huge runways to gain momentum and tons of space as they drive to the basket. This was a common thread throughout many of the teams that we discussed today, and getting out in transition a lot can supplement some half-court limitations when it comes to generating efficient offense. Also, with double big looks surging back and offensive rebounding rates 16% higher than they were in 2020, we're seeing more offenses lean into dictating the possession battle by prioritizing size and athleticism too. I also believe we're witnessing the natural progression of the NBA's ongoing skill boom. The late 2010s and early 2020s became an era of heliocentricity, with an abundance of these ball-dominant, pick-and-roll heavy guards able to float an offense on their own. That hasn't gone away, and in the years since, superstar talent only continues to get crazier, but the skill development of these supporting talents has been even more significant. We've evolved past role players spreading out around their star point guard and just knocking down catch and shoot threes. Players are expected to also be able to drive and make passing reads. There are more skilled ball handlers on the floor for most offenses. This means more teams now have enough aggregate ball handling to capably compensate for a star point guard's absence. And in this era in which offenses are largely built upon attacking weak links, as we discussed, if you can put together a solid offense and a better defense with big athletic wings on the floor without a point guard, you can see why numerous teams are better built to overcome that absence than ever before. But with all that being said, do I actually think these teams we've highlighted today are better without their standout point guards? For the most part, no. As much as I like Atlanta's depth, athleticism, defense, and transition play, to be a serious playoff team, I believe they need an elite half-court creator like Trae Young, someone who can consistently create advantages and manufacture offense for himself and teammates. I commend the ways Atlanta has found to produce decent offense without Trae, but without him in the half-court against a quality, locked-in defense, they simply don't have that guy who is comfortable enough handling, getting into the teeth of the defense, knocking down a pull-up jumper, or making an elite passing read for me to buy into them. Trae is a pro at carrying team offenses, and with the most ball handling, cutting, and athleticism around him he's ever had, I expect him to do so again when he gets healthy. Although Trae will make life harder on them defensively, I believe they have strong enough personnel to still engineer a good defense around him, and that he will make them a legitimately good offense in a way that isn't possible without him. But he's got to prove that he is a real net positive for this team and will have to come through in the playoffs as a legit offensive engine. So this truly is a pivotal moment in his career for Atlanta's future team building strategy and for the question at the heart of this video. But I do believe they need him to be the best version of themselves. As great as Houston's offense is, and I have been so impressed, I do still worry about their lack of a lead ball handler or volume pull-up three-point shooting guard like VanVleet when they get to the playoffs. And certain elite defenses will be able to bring more ball pressure to test their handles, force more turnovers, and pack the paint to shrink the floor on this team given their lack of three-point shooting and subpar spacing. Their offense is still going to be really good because of what they excel at, but I do think there will come a point where they feel the absence of a player in that mold, and it makes life a bit harder on them compared to other elite offenses. But again, we've never seen an offense that operates quite like Houston, so maybe it does hold up just as well in the playoffs. It's just my prediction that they'll run into a couple issues, but it's going to be fascinating to watch it play out. The Heat, they might just be better without Tyler Herro. I love their new offense. Their defense is better without him, and I'm kind of worried that when he comes back, he's going to mess stuff up. Especially because, although he's a very good offensive player, he's still not nearly at, say, Trae Young's level when it comes to elevating team offense. But I'm still not ready to call it, even on this one, because we haven't even seen him play with this team yet. So, the idea here is certainly not that point guards are plummeting in value in today's NBA. In fact, it is probably still the most talent-rich position in basketball, loaded with transformative offensive players. Most good teams do have a star point guard who they benefit from greatly. Some teams desperately need a quality point guard, and even some of the teams we've discussed who are finding ways to win without one would ultimately benefit from having that sort of skilled pick and roll playmaker when it comes to raising their ceiling or their viability in a playoff setting. I do believe collective speed, size, strength, and athleticism are uber important in today's NBA, but I also believe you can win more in the regular season predominantly off of that athleticism and effort and transition. Yet in the playoffs, the standard for half-court offense becomes higher, and it is so important. And a great point guard is a huge asset in that regard. Also, it should go without saying that it's not like every team can go out there and replicate what the Rockets are doing. Very few teams have a center who can take on that sort of playmaking load, and they are, again, the best offensive rebounding team on record. They're a total outlier. But the point is that more teams than ever before are finding ways to win without a point guard. Of course, the point guard position has continued and will continue to evolve. We already did away with the pure point guard. Now you have more and more big ball handlers who can lead offense as primary creators. 6'6" guys like Shea or Cade Cunningham who can also more than hold their own defensively. That is the utopian vision of the evolved point guard that we will continue to see more of down the line as talent gets better, because bigger, better athletes keep getting more skilled around the league. So point guards will always remain essential in the NBA because the term has almost become synonymous with primary perimeter creator, and those guys are pretty much the needle movers in this sport. So the question about diminishing value is much more specifically about small guards, often with more rigid offensive styles and overwhelmingly with defensive issues. Still, small guards are not anywhere close to being eliminated from the game, in my eyes, as bad as he may be defensively. I cannot look at a player like Jalen Brunson and view him as anything other than an elite player because he does so much for a team offense. But what is beyond dispute is that the bar for a small guard to get on the floor and have a significant role is higher than ever. In the same league that just a half decade ago felt like it was so significantly slanted in their favor has changed again in ways that raise more questions about the viability of heavily relying upon this broad archetype. More than ever before, we are being forced to ask, even as these point guards boast impressive offensive skill and production, if the good really outweighs the bad, and by how much, and could we find an alternate path to win without him? Do we need to move on to ultimately raise our ceiling? We still have a lot to learn in relation to these questions. Like I said, things are changing fast in the NBA, but this has unquestionably been one of the stories of the early season. And I am fascinated by these questions, thrilled by the teams who are pushing the boundaries of point guardless basketball, and cannot wait to see where this all ends up going.